All right, folks, it is May 9th of 2024. And of course, all kinds of things are happening in the world. We're going to see who joins us in terms of our regular panelists and what they've got to say about a number of these things. But Biden is saying he will stop sending bombs and artillery shells to Israel if it launches a major attack on Rafah. So that is something that is going on as Biden is threatening to halt weapon deliveries. And of course, this is sparking anger and infighting among the Israeli officials. And of course, the Stormy Daniels trial is still going on as well. So the hush money trial is going on, and Stormy Daniels is set to return to the witness stand. So we're going to see what folks have to say about that. And it does look like Israel has seized control of the Rafah border crossing, and there are some people that are saying that the impact could be definitely devastating. And apparently, tornadoes and severe storms left three dead in Tennessee and North Carolina as the damage trail stretched about 900 miles and all along those lines. Right now, it's definitely some cool weather here in Durham, North Carolina, but we'll see if any of that severe weather comes. If it does, it might be later on this afternoon. But the last time I checked, it was only a medium risk of that happening and all along those lines. But it definitely is. Let's see back to what's happening in the world news and everything. Uh, in terms of a Natalie Epic, definitely along those lines. It looks like the Labor is insisting that the ex-Tory MP is a good fit for their party. So it does look like there is some cases, just like there have been here in American politics, of people switching from one side of the aisle to the other side of the aisle. And the Labor chair has defended the admissions of Elbick while Abbott is suspended, and UK Prime Minister Sunak suffers further blows, as of course that is another conservative lawmaker that is defected to Labor. So that is something that we're seeing in the news, and of course we still got. It looks like an emboldened Russia is celebrating Victory Day. So it looks like Putin says Russia will not allow anyone to threaten us as Moscow revels in its military might at the Victory Day parade. Putin seeks to keep Ukraine in the distance, and I guess he's definitely saying that the arrogant West is risking a global conflict. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And in Africa, a Transair Boeing 737 skid off the runway in Senegal. So it looks like that Boeing 737 plane caught on fire in Senegal after a failed takeoff attempt. 11 were injured, but it doesn't look like there were any fatalities, at least not what I'm reading, and all along those lines. And the first shipment of aid to the U.S. built floating pier in Gaza has departed from Cyprus. So that's something else that we're seeing. And like I talked about before, there is still that flooding in southern Brazil. So it looks like rescue work is underway at the Rio Grande do Sul as threats of new storms are luring or looming and all along those lines, and animals are stranded amid that devastating floods in Brazil. So Brazil's historic flood creates a Katrina moment like for the Lula's presidency. So we'll see what happens in that space. And Russia launched its biggest airstrike in weeks, and that is piling pressure on the Ukraine's power grid. So it definitely looks like that is what they're doing. They're trying to further strain that country's energy system and all along those lines. And in Yemen, the Houthi rebels are claiming two attacks in the Gulf of Aden as Iran officials renew the nuclear bomb kind of threat and all along those lines. And definitely that is something else going on. So we've got conflicts just going on left and right. And the U.S. Air Force AC 130J Ghost Rider sinked a fishing boat in an exercise. So it looks like the U.S. and allies sink a mock enemy ship in a military drill. So that's definitely something that's going on as they're trying to make sure that folks know the kind of power that the U.S. has and all along that way. And the mom of a captured U.S. soldier, Gordon Black, says his girlfriend lured him to Russia. So the arrested U.S. soldier was in Russia to pursue his girlfriend, and the Russian court says the detained U.S. Army soldier will be held into July for allegedly causing significant damage. So Paul Whelan tells the CNN he has a bit of concern about the arrest of the soldier in Russia, which could complicate his case and all along those lines. And another German politician is attacked as concerns rise over violence ahead of the EU elections in June. So Olaf Scholz has condemned the attacks on the politicians after the third assault in a week. Berlin senator attacked in library amid a spate of violence against German politicians. And students across Europe are holding Gaza war protests in the run up to the UN vote on Palestinian statehood. So there is going to be a vote on Palestinian statehood, and police has broken up another protest by pro-Palestinian activists, and that was actually at one of the universities. I believe that was in the Netherlands, but there have been a number of them throughout Europe, and of course, the police have been breaking them up in Europe, just like they have here in the U.S. as well, as they've been clearing those encampments and all along those lines. And the Saudi forces have been uh, kill to kill to clear land for an eco city. So Saudi authorities are approving lethal force to clear residents from a land for a futuristic eco city. So they're definitely looking at a way to put up this big eco city, and we'll see whether they get any pushback from the folks in that particular part of the world as well. And a visiting CIA chief is said to tell Netanyahu he still sees a chance for a deal with Hamas. So a fateful cabinet meeting Thursday is said to set to determine updated Gaza strategy, and Israel is remaining optimistic for a possible workaround on the U.S. military aid halt. So definitely the CIA director in Cairo, as talks for Israel Hamas deal have reached a critical point. And in North Macedonia has elected the first woman president as the center left incumbent suffers a historic loss. So the winner of the North Macedonia parliamentary election will be seeking a governing coalition partner. So, you know, a lot of these countries around the world do have coalition governments, and we'll see whether this one works as well. And in Myanmar, the civilian casualties are rising as their civil war is continuing, and resistance is going on in that space as well. So in Myanmar war, a crucial window is looming for both the junta as well as the rebels, and all along those lines. So definitely be interesting in terms of what goes on in there. And of course, we got Xi Jinping visit to Bombay embassy after vowing to never forget. So G skips the NATO bombing site in Serbia in what some people are saying is a calculated move for the West. So G definitely said that to the folks there in Serbia, so Serbia told Xi Jinping, no one reveres you like we do. And Transitional Council in Haiti is embracing new changes following turmoil as gang violence grips the country, and all along those lines. And definitely no surprise, it looks like the U.S. snubbed Putin's swearing in, and we do know, I believe that the French showed up, but I'm not sure who else showed up for this particular swearing in, and all along those lines. So let's get to some U.S. news, and then I'll bring in my esteemed fellow panelists and all along those lines and see what they've got to say about a number of things going on in the world and what's happening in the world and what their thoughts are about it. USC's, the University of Southern California's Faculty Senate censured President Carol Folt and Provost over the commencement. So it looks like that is one of the things that is taking place, as that was definitely there. That was after the commencement cancellation. So it'll be interesting to see how folks play that out. And in New York City, the New York City school boss defiantly insists that anti-Semitic incidents have been dealt with, and that definitely it looks like Stefanik has grilled the New York City school's chief on pro-Hamas teachers being kept on the payroll after anti-Semitic riots. And definitely now that we've been having these conversations around what's going on in the college level, now we're looking at what's going on in the secondary level as well. And an airman was fatally shot by a Florida deputy who was in the wrong apartment, according to what the family attorneys have said. So, a Florida deputy fatally shot a African American airman, Roger Fortson, and civil rights attorneys are raising questions in that fatal Okaloosa County officer involved shooting. So, definitely a lot of people are wanting answers as to what happened and how that took place and how this all went down in that way. And it looks like Byron Trump, Donald Trump's youngest son, will be playing a role at the Republican convention. So Byron Trump is to step into the political arena as a Florida delegate at the Republican convention. So he'll be serving as a delegate for his dad. So it does look like he may be stepping into the political limelight as well. So we're going to see what folks have to say about that. Maybe there's a possibility of another political dynasty. We know that the Bushes had a little bit of a dynasty, and definitely there have been other dynasties, including that of the Kennedys, and maybe there's some grooming to make Byron Trump go into the political realm also. So it'll be interesting to see what that is all about and whether he decides to step into his father's footsteps and all along those lines. And the Houston mayor, that's Houston, Texas, says the police is chief is out amid probe into thousands of dropped cases. So the Houston police chief, Troy Fenner, has retired, and the HB Houston Police Department open job for top cop may be hard to fill permanently because that is definitely a rough area of the country and a rough area of the world. So it'll be interesting to see whether anybody wants to go for that job. Maybe Nick has some friends in the legal profession that might want to go and become the head cheese there in that part of the world. So definitely interesting to see whether anybody wants to go over there or anything along those lines that want to be the head cheese in Houston and all in that space. Of course, we've got Sasha Starr with us as well, and we've also got hopefully Nick will be joining us as well. So you got any friends that want to be the head cheese there and the head police officer in Houston, Texas? Because apparently they're trying to clear their whole thing out, and that's a difficult part of the world. So I don't know if you want to go being the head boss there in
No,
Houston.
no, I don't want to get shot at. Go to Houston and have a bunch of people shoot at me. It doesn't sound like a good time, nor would I recommend my friends to do it. I do have some people I don't like I can send that way. Maybe that's probably about it. Well, yesterday we left it off about Russia. Apparently there were, I heard 22,000 people asking for political asylum here in the United States from Russia. But
I mean, I don't know if it was all 22,000 showed up on the southern border. I don't know if they were all asking for asylum or if there are other things they could ask for, but they showed up hoping to enter the U.S.
Yeah, well, I mean, but you can't blame them because the thing is, Vlad is just sending people to their slaughter overseas. However, it seems to me that our friend Joe Biden decided to not send ammunition over to Israel. I think what he needs to do is send it over to Ukraine and beat up the Russians. That would be a good use of it because they do need to get beaten up. Still not happy.
Israel has plenty of ammo right now. They're not suffering for lack of ammo.
Well, give them as much as you can. So give the Ruskies as much as they can. Still not happy with the $3.5 billion giveaway to Microsoft. I'm glad my professional investor invest in these wonderful companies and that we make a lot of money as people pay more in inflation and taxes. And I did want to correct Jacoby that when he said, well, when Biden came in, inflation was 9%. Apparently the news said, no, it's like 1.5. Then it jumped to 9. And then it went back down to like 3 or 4. And then it went back up to 5. So it's like a yo-yo out there on the inflation rate. So
is the $3.5 billion, is the site going to be that site that was supposed to go to Foxconn? Is that
no? I don't know. The thing is, apparently the Foxconn deal blew up. But see, the thing is, this is how greedy these people are. Okay, so this is a site that the president of Microsoft grew up around, the new president. So it's basically political payback for Wisconsin. In other words, so Joe Biden can get his little hands on the state of Wisconsin. So they sprinkle fairy dust, aka our money, $3.5 billion, to companies like Microsoft that don't need it, to entice them to put a plant in Wisconsin so they can get votes. So it's all hidden graft and corruption in plain sight, which is the best way to do hidden graft and corruption. But my objection is this: the United States had to borrow that money, sending everybody here deeper in debt to give Microsoft the $3.5 billion, and then they lie to us. I hate it when government lies, you know. So I think I'm going to enjoy Spain, but maybe they lie there too. Who knows?
They probably lie in Spain. I think they lie everywhere. They lie just in terms of
the lie is it's an investment. It's not an investment. It's a government giveaway, you know. And it's not only that; it's really bad. It's a loan. Now, being a greedy capitalist, I'm thinking about investing in companies like Microsoft and Intel that are the beneficiaries of the big government giveaway. And of course, the media just shrugs their shoulders. They go, "Okay, it's just normal," but it's really, really bad. In terms of,
I think it is. I think the Foxconn site in Wisconsin. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Really. Okay. Yeah. And the Foxconn deal went south. So they've been the Democrats have been trying to buy Wisconsin for years. Okay. So one way to do it is to send graft and corruption that direction. And
hey, but Nick, is it just the Democrats? Because one of the stories that I mentioned was that I believe it was in Saudi Arabia that they were clearing out an entire area in order to build an eco city and all along those lines. So I guess that then Saudi Arabia, they wanted to create this eco city which will be environmentally sound or whatever else an eco city might be.
I don't think they have to clean out people, Mark. There's nobody who lives there, so it's not a big problem. You also forgot to mention Marjorie Taylor Greene. She had her butt handed to her in Congress, which I think is about time. You know, she raised, Johnson should leave because fill in the blank. And everybody said no. They booed her, which is not very, you know, what they call it, mature, but that's Congress. And then they voted against her, which is very mature. And I'm glad they did, because if you had a depth chart and you had an idiot chart, she'd be high up on the idiot chart. Okay. So
her and Kirsty Gnomes and a bunch of others.
I wouldn't
they'd
give
be up
them
there on the depth chart and everything.
What?
Yeah, I did have a question to ask you, because I had mentioned, I said I was going to bring it up because y'all had asked me this and everything along those lines. So, you know, one of your favorite universities and everything I know is Brown University, because you talk about Brown and all along those lines. And I did find this, because this is one of about 30 locations and 30 colleges that actually offered money to Ukrainian students, and they actually got a full ride. So I just wondered, since we were upset about the Palestinians, and this was actually earlier, Brown had actually announced support measures, and they were giving both currently enrolled and incoming Ukrainian students. And this was after the attack, 100% of the cost of tuition, fees, room, board, and school supplies. So it would this be okay in your mind?
Totally wrong. No, it's not okay, because the thing is, it's the metric that's being used, and the metric is, hey, I'm Ukrainian, I'm deprived, give me a scholarship. They are not scholars, Mark. Okay, no, the thing is, universities are not educational institutions anymore. They're political institutions, obviously. And the thing is, it's not like, hey, I'm a good student. I worked really hard. I got good grades. I got good SAT scores. I have good metrics. And can I get a scholarship? No, you don't, because our scholarship went to the Ukrainians or the Palestinians. Then why bother go to universities like Brown? I mean, I would just say I'd cross them off the list. This is a political institution. It's not a university. Yeah, Rick.
So Brown this year, admittance rate 5.2%. For every kid that gets in, 20 apply. Right. And so every kid picked has special considerations, because for every kid who gets in, there are 10 kids who are perfectly qualified to do great at Brown.
Right. Well, the thing is, what happens is that these same 10 kids apply to the top 20 universities. Once you hit
because the whole deal has been going on for 20 years, where once computers and the Common App made it easier to apply to multiple colleges, it led to an arms race where every elite kid applies to 20 good universities, which means the universities are flooded with applicants, which means their acceptance rates go down, which means elite kids and their parents freak out even more and apply to even more universities.
Right. So, yeah, it's kind of a smart, but see, the universities aren't educational institutions anymore. It's kind of a waste. Realize that the universities that people are going to be applying to usually operate on 2 metrics. There's only 2. So if you have other talents, forget them, throw them down the toilet. And the 2 metrics are this. Number 1, your grade point average, which grade point averages today are like almost the most meaningless things in America because there's grade inflation. You walk in high school, you get an A, and then they have sometimes where you get more than an A. I found it to be sick. And this goes back 40 years ago when I was in high school. It hasn't changed. It's still a horrible metric, grades. Then the number 2 metric is your ETS scores. ETS is the one that does all the standardized
Educational Testing Service.
Yeah, ETS out of Princeton, New Jersey, and they present the same garbage over and over again. And when they're called their SAT stupid questions and answers. And it doesn't matter if you take the SAT, the LSAT, the GMAT, they're all basically using the same stupid problem solving questions and the same reading comprehension questions. And here's the sad part, which dumb people don't know, but the elites do know. A lot of your teachers tell you, well, you can't study for it. Baloney. In other words, the thing is, the metrics are pretty clear that if you study, and the longer and harder you study for that, you will be able to improve. In other words, let's imagine you're a student, you walk in, your SAT score will be X, but if you want it to go to Y or Z, you actually have to work it. But go on, Rick.
So I've taught the SAT, and they used to think you couldn't study for the or claim you couldn't because it takes such effort. You can't study for 2 hours. What you need to do is take 30 practice tests over the course of a year, and eventually you'll eventually edge up. And that's such a time commitment for, as you said, a BS test that doesn't develop a skill that you will use in other areas of life. The COVID killed the SAT and the ACT for a while. Thousands of colleges dropped it because it was hard to administer it if you could only put 2 people in a room. The SAT is given to groups of kids, but now it's coming back. And the SAT adds no predictive value to a student's portfolio.
It has very little value whatsoever. But since the thing is, when it comes to psychometric testing in general, and it comes to this type of testing, there's a trivia thing going on right now. I think Allison Gross is playing, and Jim Holzheiser, and all these trivia nuts, right?
But it's like the tournament.
Yeah, they're Masters tournament. I love watching it because they show the difference between the Masters, or I would call the Grandmaster, and the regular idiots who play trivia. But trivia is just like chess. Somebody goes in, oh, I'm a good chess player. No, you're not. In other words, well, I read a book. I got one book there I read, so I'm great. No, it takes years to be a master. I mean, you just don't walk in, you become a master. You actually have to play, study, sweat blood for years. Then you become a master. So you have to have talent plus a lot of sweat and blood.
Yeah, I studied for years to go on Jeopardy, and then I went on Jeopardy, and I did not win. Most people who go on Jeopardy don't win.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't win and everything. And speaking of sweat and blood and all along those lines and everything, I had a couple of quick questions. One, I have no idea, but I was wondering if Rick had ever heard of them, because one of the colleges that gave aid sounds like almost like a socialistic type college title and everything. But what is the University of the People? Because it's in Pasadena, and I didn't know if you ever heard of them. But apparently they gave 1,000 scholarships, and I'm trying to figure out what is the University of the People. So, Rick, have you ever heard of this university?
No, but I can tell you, my wife worked at a private high school in Pasadena, and there are all sorts of progressive schools.
California has a whole different education system. It's like the wild, wild west of education.
No, they have a whole different education system. But like I said, this was a list of
getting back to trivia, Rick, there's 2 metrics. Number 1 is memory. You have to have a good memory to do trivia. Then there's another metric, which they don't. It's exposure, E.
That's right. Okay, so studying for trivia is the same thing as studying for the SAT. The way to do
studying for chess. You're absolutely correct.
And the deal is you need to study for so long and look at so many problems on the SAT that no problem that you will see when you take it for real is unfamiliar.
That is correct. That is
speaking of metrics and all along those lines and everything.
On trivia is that those people that are doing real well now, like Gross, she did like I did. She played in high school. Okay, but
and then she played bar trivia or online
trivia. She played bar trivia, but she also played in college. She played, which I didn't play college trivia. Then she played bar trivia, and then she played internet team trivia. In other words, she's a grandmaster at trivia because she eats, drinks, sleeps the blood of
She's
trivia.
probably seen more than 150,000
Nick, speaking of trivia and all along those lines,
speaking
of trivia, there's a major sports debate that's going on, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts around this. But there is a basketball player named Austin Rivers. He's actually the son of Doc Rivers, and he's a retired basketball player. But he's been making this argument that NBA players could survive in the NFL and vice versa. A lot of the NFL people are kind of giving him some pushback because they're going like, "There's no way that you would survive. LeBron James won't even survive." And all along those lines, I just wonder your thoughts around this debate, because there is a number of people that are that he has opened up this can of worms where he's basically saying that he could do. And there have been some people like, I think, Bo, I can't think of Bo last name. Bo Jackson played both sports, and there have been a few other ones as well.
So I've looked at some NBA players training, and for some players, including LeBron James, who's 39, who's rumored to spend $1 million a year, which he can afford, on the maintenance of his body. If you look at LeBron James at his body and also him train, LeBron James is 6'8.5", more than 250. LeBron can probably bench close to 300, which is, it's not a lineman number. Some NFL lineman can probably put up close to 500, but he's a strong guy, very muscular. And that, I think some NBA players, not all of them, use football, NFL style strength training to make themselves more durable and more.
But one of the arguments that the NFL players are making is that they don't do load management the way that the NBA players do. So the NBA players will do that whole load management thing.
Today it's too competitive. It's too competitive. They can be good, but they won't be great. It's just like a good trivia player. If you dump them into chess, they'd have their rears handed to it. I already know that. They have good memories. They could spend a lot of time on openings, but they have a big problem. First of all, they didn't play in high school, middle school, elementary school. Then chess has 3 metrics as opposed to 2. Chess, you have to have opening, which is pure raw memorization. Then you have to have visualization, which is be able to look at the board in the future. And then you have to have raw calculation. And a lot of these trivia people, they don't have those. And so what happens, they'll do real well in the opening. And I saw a lot of kids do that because they had great memories. And then they would just fall apart afterwards. Well, it's the same thing in sports. Oh, I'm really good at basketball, but that doesn't translate to football. I'm sorry.
Here's how it could translate. Say you're basketball, you run like a basketball game, you're running like 5 miles total up and down the court in a game. So say you're 6'7", and you've got pretty good foot speed. That extra, and you've got, like, let's say you've got a vertical reach of like, a span of 7'2". You get just that extra height is the equivalent of a step or two against a defender if you're trying to catch passes. So some probably could survive, but there are 17 regular season NFL games. There are 82 regular season basketball games. So and the number of injuries per season in the NFL is greater than the number of players. So each player averages more than one injury a season.
Well, it's so hard to translate from one to the next unless you have built up a lot of muscle memory. Let's look at a guy who's probably one of the best athletes ever in the world, Michael Jordan, okay, who didn't make his high school team, but then made it after a while. Now he goes, I'm going to try baseball. He failed. Okay, he didn't develop enough muscle memory in high school and college to make it in the pros. So the best he made was like an A-League. So my thinking is, can they be good? Yeah, they can be good. Will they be great today? No, it's too competitive. The world is too big. You've got too many good players out there. You could also take the top chess player, Magnus Carlsen, stick him in a trivia tournament. He'll have his rear handed to him, and he can be pretty good. He's got a great memory.
There's the Malcolm Gladwell thing that it takes 10,000 hours of
Yeah.
of doing
It's
something to get good at that thing.
You're good at
10,000 hours is like working full
Well,
time for 5 years.
I think you have to have talent plus. In other words, you need to have some basic talent plus the work. Now we go to the SATs. Same thing, which I told my son because he wanted to really ace the SATs so he get a full scholarship to Duke. I said, you got to treat it like you do video games. What do you mean? Because he used to play video games day and night. I said, you got to work it every day for a year at least. In other words, day in, day out, sleep it. So he brought his scores from like, he was not taking the SATs, he was taking the GREs at that point in time. Okay. So it went from 1470 to 1585. I said, the only way you're going to hit those 1500 scores is you got to work it every day solidly for at least a year or maybe two. And he already had a good base to start with because he's in the 1400s. But to get a 1400 to like close to 1600, you're not going to do it because, hey, I took
my brother.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
For the GMAT, my brother took 30 practice tests and raised his score, a ton, and got into Wharton.
Yeah, right. But the thing is, you got to work. That you have to have the talent. Plus, as you know, Rick, you got to put the work effort in. Okay, if you're going to do well on these tests,
it's a shame because you're putting in all this work for something you'll never use. Well,
never use again. I know that.
You'll use it again.
Nick and Rick, hold on a second. But hold on, I have
no valuable use.
Hold on a second. I've been finding some great ones again. So this is one that I found that I think y'all will enjoy. This is a gentleman that actually says that the video world is actually, or the education world may just be a hedge fund. So let's check out this and see what y'all think about Scott Calloway and all along those lines, because he has some very interesting quotes that he brought up and all along those lines. So I'll play this and then hear what y'all have got to say about it and all along those lines.
We're public servants, not fucking Chanel bags.
You can make money off Chanel bags.
Harvard is the best example of this. They've increased their endowment in the last 40 years and have decided to expand their enrollment, their freshman class, by 4%. Any university that doesn't grow their freshman class faster than population, that has over $1 billion in endowment, should lose their tax-free status because they're no longer in higher education. They're a hedge fund offering classes.
They keep the administrators paid.
My first recommendation, Biden should take some of that $750 billion earmark to bail out the 1/3 of people that got to go to college on the backs of the 2/3 that didn't, and give $1 billion to our 500 greatest public institutions, size adjusted, in exchange for three things. One, they use technology and scale to reduce tuition by 2% a year, expand enrollments by 6% a year, and increase the number of vocational certifications and non-traditional four-year degrees by 20%. Where does that get us? In just 10 years, that doubles the freshman seats and cuts the cost in half. This isn't radical. This is called college in the 80s and 90s. Another transfer of wealth. Look at what's happened to wages. Oh, they've gone up, not as much as corporate profits. There's a healthy tension between capital and labor. For the last 40 years, capital has been kicking the shit out of labor. Well, you think, whoa, what about wages, right? They've gone up. Well, if you compare them to the S&P, they barely register. It's been an amazing time to own assets, but your attempt to get the certification or the income such that you can acquire assets has gotten harder and harder. In my class of 300 kids, it's never been easier to be a billionaire. It's never been harder to be a millionaire. By the way, our job in higher ed isn't to identify a top 1% of people who are freakishly remarkable or have rich parents and turn them into a superclass of billionaires. It's to give the bottom 90 a chance to be in the top 10. You know who doesn't need me or higher education? The top 10%. The whole point of higher ed is to give the unremarkables, i.e. yours truly, who was raised by a single immigrant mother, a shot of being remarkable. The transfer has been purposeful. While the cohorts, corporations, and the ultra-wealthy continue to garner more and more of our wealth, we have decided, I know, if they win the gold, let's give them the silver and the bronze, and let's lower their taxes. This transfer is purposeful. It's not by accident, and it works. Senior poverty is way down, and we should celebrate that. Meanwhile, child poverty is flat to up. The third rail, I'm going to talk about Social Security. It would cost $11 billion to expand the child tax credit, but that got stripped out of the infrastructure bill. But the additional $135 billion a year to Social Security, that flies right through Congress. And every year we transfer $1.4 trillion from a cohort that is increasingly doing less well to the cohort that is the wealthiest cohort in the history of this planet. I'm not against Social Security, but the criteria should be if you need it, not whether you have a catheter. 80% of you have absolutely no reason to ever take Social Security. It is bankrupting our nation, and we have fallen under this mythology that somehow it's this great social program. No, it's not. It's the great transfer of wealth from young to old.
Ooh.
How is this happening? Because our representatives are, in fact, representative. Old people vote.
That's
Washington has become a cross between the land of the dead and the Golden Girls. Quite frankly, this is fucking ridiculous. And if I sound ageist, I am. And you know who else is ageist? Biology. When Speaker Pelosi had her first child, get this, 2/3 of households didn't have color televisions, and Castro had just declared martial law. But she's supposed to understand the challenges of a 17-year-old girl who's 5'9", 95 pounds, getting tips on dieting and extreme dieting from Facebook. She's supposed to understand the challenges that a 27-year-old single mother face. By the way, young and dreamy. Young and dreamy. The great intergenerational theft took place under the auspices of a virus. I know. Let's use the greatest health crisis in the century to really speedball the transfer. This is the NASDAQ from 2008 to 2012. We let the markets crash. And by the way, you need churn, you need disruption, because it seeds and recalibrates advantage and wealth from the incumbents to the entrants. It's a natural part of the cycle. But wait, lately, no, 1 million people dying would be bad, but what would be tragic is if we let the NASDAQ go down and guys like me lost wealth. So we pumped the economy, which again, increased the massive transfer of wealth. The best 2 years of my life, COVID, more time with my kids, more time with Netflix, and my value of my stocks absolutely exploded. And who has to pay for my prosperity? Not me. Future generations who will have to deal with an unprecedented level of debt. Why am I here and why do I get the prosperity I enjoy? Because in 2008, we bailed out the banks, but we didn't bail out the economy. We let the markets fall. So as I was coming into my prime income earning years, I got to buy, no joke, these stocks at these prices. This is where those stocks are now. Where does a young person find disruption? When you bail out the baby boomer owner of a restaurant, all you're doing is robbing opportunity from the 26-year-old graduate of a culinary academy that wants her shot. We need disruption. We're economically attacking the young, but I know, let's attack their emotional and mental well-being. Let's take advantage of the fact of the flaws in our species with medieval institutions, Paleolithic instincts, and godlike technology. I'm just going to say, I think Mark Zuckerberg has done more damage to young people in our nation while making more money than any person in history.
Good for him.
Oh, but wait, what could be worse? It's as if we let an adversary implant a neural jack into our youth to raise a generation of civic, military, and business leaders that hate America. How can we be this stupid? All right, this all adds up to a bunch of graphs all headed up and to the right. And what are they? What's the first one? Oh, that's self-harm rates, which have exploded, especially among girls, since my colleague Jonathan Haidt pointed out it's really gone crazy since social went on mobile. What's the next one? Teens with depression.
So while he's frozen, I'm going to say that guy knows what he's talking
Biggest fear of my
about.
parents was that I was going to get in too much trouble.
That guy, I mean, that guy seems to have vast general expertise. Like if your toilet broke, that guy would know how to fix it. Everything he said, like, you know, I maybe disagree out of 2 sentences out of the 200 sentences I heard him say. He knows his crap. People over 45 own 94% of the privately held wealth in the country. We became the technologically dominant nation we are after World War II. The deal of World War II was the GI Bill. If you fight and put your life at risk for the US, we will pay for your college. So that's when the SAT was necessary, because before World War II, nobody went to college. After World War II, flooded with people, they needed the all these 22, 24-year-old soldiers wanted to learn by starter homes. So they flooded the admission system. So they needed the SATs back then in 1946.
Yeah, all I can
Hey,
say is
so
thank
hang on a
you,
second.
Mark, for putting this on, Mark, because this is good stuff. Today on CBS and NBC, all they talked about was tornadoes in the Midwest. Let me tell you something. Tornadoes happen in the Midwest all the time. It's ridiculous. This is actually good stuff that you put on, Mark, because this is things that are happening in America today that people really do need to know about. It takes place over a long period of time, and this guy's spot on. Like I said, I agreed with about 85, 90% of the stuff that he was saying. I'm not sure about the transfer of the wealthy elite universities to public schools, but he certainly has a point that they've become hedge fund managers. They make more on their endowment than they
billion-dollar endowments, these Ivy League, and hoarding their precious class size.
Right.
Harvard lets in.
Oh yeah, right. That creates the eliteness of the university. In other words, it's what we used to call the policy of exclusion. If I can create a group and exclude you from it, Rick, then we're a good group. So what's happening is that it's just a policy of exclusion. It makes them feel better or stronger because they can exclude other people.
Hey,
so
Nick, hold on a second.
And they
Nick, hold on a second, because I want to hear from Sasha, because this was actually the video that I was referring to on his modern investment. He is an investment wizard and all along those lines. That's what Milan calls him and everything. But you heard him using the S&P, which I know you and Milan talk about. You heard him using the NASDAQ and even some of his own investments, and some that had quadrupled and not like even done much better than quadrupled. But what was your take on what Mr. Galloway was saying? Sasha.
You're talking about the part where he's talking about endowment funds?
Yes.
I'll tell you, my opinion is that if endowment fund has a great manager and it's making profits of, unlike what I did last year, 188% net profit, but rather even say 100%. If I could make 188, why somebody else, professional, top of in his league, cannot make 100%? Okay, make 75%. It's very realistic in this environment. So, who needs university? You need endowment fund. University is a loss leader. University is liability. So what you do, you burn university and leave endowment funds. That's what I'll say.
Not only that,
I said $1 billion. Harvard has a $50 billion endowment, Yale $40 billion. If these universities were people, they'd be the richest people, among the richest people in the world.
Right. And it's non-taxable. So the thing is, it's even better for the universities than what Sasha's saying, better than investment. So I go out and invest, but at the end of the day, I'm turning around giving back to the US government because of my profits on my interest, dividends, capital gains. The university, they get capital gains, interest, and dividends. They get to keep it all. So
Galloway question. Yesterday we had discussion, I think, on world politics, and someone, I will not call the name, somebody completely screwed the ownership of, for example, Vanguard Capital Fund, who owns it and so on. I know it, but that's not financial show, so I'm not going to say it about it now. But who, in your opinion, Nick, owns endowment fund of any university, say Yale or Harvard or so on? So you would say most likely is that yes, Yale owns a Yale endowment fund and Harvard's or so on. So in this case, this money in endowment funds belong to university. Who owns the university then? Any ideas?
Well, the university is usually a nonprofit company owned by a select group of elite trustees who basically they run the university. So it's basically a club. It's a club, Sasha, and you're not invited. Okay. So, and people don't realize that these are very closed, elite institutions. I used to hang with these institutions, man. And the funny thing is, it's part of our institution and you're not invited. And they had clubs like that down in South Florida too. The Everglades Club was notorious. It's a private club, and guess what? You're not invited. Universities are private clubs. And by the way, the people here, the people listening, you're not invited to participate.
Well, no, hold on a second, Nick. I can't say that you're not invited, because one of the things that these clubs do, and whether you like it or not, is they try to be diverse, and they try to have some diversity in the club, and all along those lines. At least that's what they've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years, because I can tell you that the UNC Board of Trustees, my mom was on that. I think she was also on the board at North Carolina Central University there for a while as well. So yeah, she did get invited, but because she was running a trust fund at the time and all along those lines. So definitely you can get invited, but I do know that they try to have some diversity in who is on the various trust funds and all in that space and everything. Jacoby, any thoughts about, because one of the things, and I think you had not been here at the time that I was showing the video of Mr. Galloway, but he was talking about this notion that we are giving a lot of this money to the elderly, and he was not saying that he had any problem with Social Security, but he was also saying that we are taking it away from our young people and kind of mortgaging their future away. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts as to whether we are doing a disservice to our young people in the way we're handling some of our finances.
I don't think we're doing a disservice to our young people when we're trying to help the elderly, because we do have a older society growing because of our population growth. So being able to help the elderly at a time now to at least have something in the books instead of fighting when we need it badly, I'm not worried about that. I think there are other reasons why we're robbing from, our youth. Like we're forcing them with these predatory student loans and complaining when we're trying to help them deal with those predatory student loans and stuff like that. That's more of a robbing from the youth than trying to, help Social Security, Medicare, and all the other stuff.
So these student loans, why do universities that have billions and billions of dollars in endowments force students into student loans?
I don't know about. I know the elite universities, if your parents make less than 150 grand a year, will often give you a full ride. So right. I mean, so kids do get financial aid from the elites. Yeah. And I don't know about the less elites, but yeah, I know there's some Southern universities that, like, if you come from a non-Southern state and you want to go to like the University of Alabama, you can get a full ride with decent grades. And they don't even have to be that great, like a 3, B average. Because they
do that in Georgia. In Georgia, you get a free ride. If you have more than a 3.0 grade point average, you can go to University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, all free. Which is
Nick,
the way.
You know the answer. What? You know the answer is what you champion every time. It's capitalism. For college is for sale. So you want to make the big dollars. You know what you got to do? You got to jack up the prices. So really the reason they charge these exorbitant prices and the reason these student loans are so ridiculous, it's all about making money. It's all about money.
But Jacoby, speaking of capitalism and all along those lines, what is our thoughts as a panel about for-profit institutions that have been now turned for-profit that had not been for-profit in throughout all their history? Because a lot of people have been very frustrated by the medical profession. We know a number of these hospitals are now for-profit hospitals, and we also know that even our prison system has gone for-profit. So there are a number of these prisons that are now being run as a profit-making institution. When
that's venture capitalism. That's these guys who get in there and they buy up companies and they squeeze the wealth out of them, and then they spin them and they squeeze the wealth, pump up the share value, then they bail out and they leave these little wrecked companies behind. When you do it with hospitals, it means closing hospitals in small communities because they don't make profit.
And that's the thing. That's exactly why, another reason why I'm against the whole for-profit institutions that have seeped into the idea that, hey, we need more private and charter schools. That leads to that's the same road that we're talking about. Those private schools, they are charter schools are taking money away from a lot of the public schools. And so that leaves the public schools at a loss, and therefore you can't offer a ton of stuff to kids because now you don't have the finances, because the first thing in the budget that gets cut, school funding. So therefore now you still have some schools that don't have proper heating, proper air conditioner units. You still have some that don't have technology to keep up with the other schools, and these are all public schools. They should be on a equal basis on the public schools. It should be
wrong.
Oh, wait, 100 years ago, the U.S. made a great invention, which was the comprehensive high school for everybody, giving everybody a little taste of everything, but letting people specialize. If you like wood shop, metal shop, you've got that. If you're good at music, we've got that. If you're good at academics, obviously we got that. And everybody was cool with that for generations. And then the everything is socialism and taxation is theft. People got in there, and now like the schools have been stripped for parts.
Hey, Nick and Jacoby, this is another. Hold on a second, Nick and Jacoby. This is another question that ties into what we're talking about, because there was
using the money that was allocated to that student to a private institution. That's it. They're not stealing anything from the public.
They
school.
are taking money away from private schools.
It has nothing to do with the fact, except you have a government institution that can't figure out.
Hold on, Nick. Why don't we do your logic? Why don't we keep the public funds with the public school system and let the private schools focus on? Oh, so wait a second.
No, because the thing is, they misallocated.
Logic now?
No, it's because your public schools, you worship misallocate. They take all the money and they buy it.
Legitimately have
Nick and Jacoby, hold on a second, both of you. Hold on a second, both of you. No, time out. Hold on a second, both of you. Hold on, because I got a question to ask that ties into what we're saying. I got a question to ask that ties into what we're saying and everything. And this is the question, because there is a governor, actually a Democratic governor in New York, that got in some recent trouble because she said, I believe it was in the Bronx, that they didn't know what a computer was, and all along those lines. So I was wondering y'all take on that, because apparently Kathy Hochul, I believe is her name and everything, had made this quote, and she got a lot of pushback, I think even from Twitter and everything, where she had said that a lot of the folks did not have any clue what a computer was, and some people were pushing back on her saying, hey, some of these people probably know more about computers than you do and everything. So I just wanted y'all's take on this quote that got Kathy Hochul in a little bit of hot water, because she made that statement and then she kind of tried to backwalk it.
Well, you can't go to school now without having some kind of computer or tablet. And if you've got a disadvantaged school where not every kid has access to that, then yeah, those kids are a little bit screwed.
They're not little, but they're big time screwed. And so, but the public school system, they could allocate the money to the computers, but instead, you know what they do? They allocate it to another administrator to pass more stupid rules that when I was working in the public school system, I had to deal with. And all I saw was graft, corruption, crime. I mean, you have to have the private schools, you have to have the charter schools, so you can get away from these people that are going to misallocate the assets to administrators, which they've been doing for the last decade.
Here's a question.
They haven't put in education. They hire somebody to go, oh, I need to enforce another rule. Let me shuffle some papers. The kids aren't benefiting from these public schools. And then Jacoby says, well, we need more of them. No, we don't.
The thing is, Nick, we do need more public schools, because not a lot of these kids that you were talking about, not a lot of the kids that you were talking about are the kids that are being serviced across the full community. You are still focused on only those that can afford. But then what you do is you create a two-tier system. The public schools are the ones that service every single person within the public, regardless of your income. Charter and private do not. Charter and private go for that income route, which leaves a lot of kids out of the whole education process. So therefore, again, yes, we do need public schools, because if you look at what is going on in our society today, the majority of people aren't the ones that can, a whole bunch of people are still left out to dry. And if we're talking about increasing our financial financial literacy and all this other stuff. These are things that are going to have to take place in public schools more so than those private and charter, because then you create, again, a two-tiered education system.
No, your solution is horrible. Let's then send all the kids to public school and let them all not get education as the money is diverted to
Incorrect.
administrators.
Nick, why is your answer? Why is your answer only? Why is your
no,
answer?
you do totally different. You push
Why
all
is
the
your
money to
only
charter school,
solution?
and then very few people go to public
Why
school.
is your only
Very
solution to
Yeah.
to forget public schools and charge families that can't afford it? Why is that your solution?
Not all the charter schools have to charge. If they get enough money from the government, they don't have to charge.
But then you're saying
they get
again,
away
that's
from
makes
the
them a public school.
public schools.
That makes them a public school.
And the thing
Charter
is, you have to get
schools-
away from the stupid public school system that all they're going to do is hire administrators.
All right,
They're not
charter
gonna see a
schools
computer
favor
tablet.
kids who have competent parents who now know how to work the system. Like we shopped for neighborhoods for years to find where we wanted to move so our kid could go to public school. And there was a thing 20 years ago, and I'm sure it still goes on now, called March of the Lemons. That's where incompetent administrators can't be fired by LA Public Schools, but they can be moved to schools where the parents maybe don't speak English, don't know what to do. So you can look at, like, we saw little school districts where across the street from each other, you might have one school that belongs to a school with wealthy, connected parents. That school's the 90th percentile. Across the street, Rio Vista, 12th percentile, because that district had more non-English speaking parents. They didn't know how to surveil their schools. They didn't know how to get incompetence kicked out.
And that's what brings us back to the point of, again, Rick, when you talked about having a variety of things in a public school system, and that offer itself, that costs money. And when we take money out of the public school systems, those things get chopped. So if we could have that financial, and I'm not saying don't have charter schools. Charter schools are fine. But yes, they need a little bit more regulation as well, because yes, they do get to a point where they do take money from people and then end up closing. Private schools do similar, but there are some good charter and some good private schools. But my point being is that we need more money and more financing and more. Yes, we do need to clean up the public school administration pipeline. We need to clean that up and clean up the litigation around that. But we need more funding in the public school system to actually take care of more of the populace, which it does, than the private school system. Sure, private schools can get some funding, but the thing is, we got to focus on the public school system. That is where the vast majority of the populace is. And if we're leaving out the vast majority of the populace, we're only creating a more undereducated society, which you guys, especially you, Nick, keep arguing against.
The 20th century has been called the American century. And part of that is we educated the crap out of everybody. We took people from the farms and dragged them to school and learned them good. And that led us, plus some luck, that we have our own continent away from.
Yeah, but we taught them the wrong things, or we wouldn't be 34 trillion in debt.
Sasha had a point he wanted to make it really quickly and everything. So Sasha, you got something you want to add?
I want to remind you that for the last about 30 years, the best female chess players in the world were the Polgar sisters. One of them was a world champion among women. Another one was one of the top 10 for quite a few years in the men's world. You know how they were all educated? By their parents.
Yeah, they were homeschooled.
Their parents taught them everything what one needs to know. Plus, each of them speaks 5 or 6 different languages. They are esteemed chess players. They are very versatile with the knowledge of history and geography and sciences and just name it. So, if you have the right parents, you don't need neither public or charter or any other school, because no one has more interest in you than your parents, provided that your parents are qualified for that.
Yeah, but they were literally every waking minute for the Polgar sisters was going to school, because in that household, imagine the conversations that went on 16, 20 hours a day, all history, all language, all chess. I went to school with the Neaton box, and those kids, they had a wrestling room in the house. And once the kids, all these brothers, once you turn 10 years old, the dad says, you're either going to wrestle or you're going to get a job. Those guys were state champions. They were fearsome because it was all wrestling all the time at the Neatonbach house.
Well, I know
just to point out something real quick. Just to point out something real quick. Homeschool, yes, there's a good thing in homeschool, but homeschools need to be heavily regulated, because you even have homeschools right now that teach kids that Nazis were great. That is a real thing. There, you can look up all the documentation around homeschool stuff. But there are some parents that do a good job at homeschooling.
No,
but again,
that's the whole point.
Not every
need these
family
regulations.
has the opportunity to
we need to go
in terms of populations.
We'll talk about the regulations.
Deal with public schools.